So, you said she was like Isaac, but what did that even mean? I barely heard Brass speak, breaking the silence that had filled the room for the last several minutes. I don't know why it was still affecting me so much. It was one kiss, not to mention he deserves it after everything I've put him through, so why can't my brain just let it go? I had thought I could finally put Sprocket behind me as well, but now I don't know if I'll ever get over losing him. I put my hooves over my head and let out a whine as the gears in my mind attempted to sort out 1,000 different things at once. Backlash! Brass screamed into my ear, startling me out of my mind and actually getting me up to my hooves. I panicked and looked over to him, trying to see what he was calling out for. He was just standing there with a bored expression on his face, staring as if he was expecting something from me. What? I finally gave in and blurted out as the silence dragged on, getting him to face hoof with a sigh. Why would he face hoof? What the hell did I do wrong? I asked you a question, and you just kind of sat there, staring off into space. He rolled his eyes and pointed to the door. We need to focus on how to get out of here. Right. Priority number 1. So, any ideas? I asked as I planted my flank on the floor. I hoped he had something good, because I sure as hell had nothing. Well, you said your guard was like Isaac, but you never exactly explained what Isaac even is. He waved his hoof around in mock frustration. The thing is, if you mean she's more robot than mare, then maybe there's a way we can turn her off, or something. Yeah, what I really need are a couple of those magnetic mines that were stuck to... I stopped at the turning gears and now worked in unison to feed me details from yesterday. Backlash? Did you break again? Brass said with a hint of playfulness. Luna, how could I have missed that? I said, as a smile crept across my muzzle. Oh, I can be stupid sometimes, but this idea might just make up for every single time I was. When Longbow had found Isaac and I, he was stranded in a minefield. A magnetic mine had been keeping his systems from rebooting. If this idea actually works, it could be our ticket out of here. Brass's expression shifted to one of confusion. But how does that help us? He was looking at me as if I had finally just snapped and lost it. The orchard door! I exclaimed, my smile now stretching from ear to ear. Zinn told me that it was magnetically sealed. Brass mouthed the words to himself as a smile started to form on his muzzle as well. You know, that could work. If you can gain access to the locking mechanism, and if you find a way to swap the polarity fast enough, you might be able to create a pulse weapon effect. He jumped up and hung around my neck as he giggled. With magnets strong enough to hold a 30-ton door in place, I'm sure that we'll corrupt her system enough that they will just fry then and there. Yeah. My smile shrunk into a glance as I hugged him back, hearing the voice of a bitch run through my mind. I sighed heavily. Every pony gets a second chance. Wait, what? Brass dropped off me and looked up in surprise. I can't let myself become a monster that ponies like 42 are too comfortable being. I mumbled out, groaning as I pulled myself to my hooves, finally able to use my rear legs again somewhat. I have to at least give her a chance. Something I should have done yesterday. Backlash. They're holding us here and forcing us to work for them. They've made the choice to do it. Brass kicked at the dirt floor with his hoof. Doesn't that mean they forfeit the right as a second chance? Maybe. But it doesn't mean that I was interrupted by the sounds of hooves on the trail outside, slowly approaching us. Not just that, but I could tell it was more than one pony heading our way. Brass and I backed away from the door as they stepped outside of it. The door creaked open slowly, revealing an unclothed Zinn, while behind her stood Pariah, looking just as irritated as ever. The two entered without so much as a single word, Pariah looking at Zinn and nodding. Kid, I can only assume that after yesterday's incident, you won't try anything against Zinn today. Pariah grumbled as Zinn flopped open a saddlebag she was wearing, hoofing out a pair of bottled waters. My throat felt completely dry as I eyed them eerily. After Lodge fixed me up, I haven't had anything to eat or drink, with little reminder from it. Now that sustenance was staring me in the face, my body had a whole lot to complain about. I nodded in response, salivating at the thought of a meal. Besides, I won't have to fight her again, one way or another, as she'll either agree to help us, i.e. her second chance, or I hit her with the pulse. Well, if I can rig it up, that is. With my nod, Zin tossed the 2 bottles at us, reaching to Pariah's pack again and pulling out a pair of canned beans. My stomach groaned in anticipation of the food, as my mind did the same in disgust from the flavor. Brass practically dove for the water, his horns sparking slightly as he tried unsuccessfully to grasp the bottle with his magic. "What do you expect to find inside the orchard?" I asked, as I hoofed the water towards me, sitting down once again. I poked Brass on the shoulder to get his attention, before grasping the bottle in both hooves and using my mouth to twist the cap off. He smiled and did the same. "Caps, buckets, and buckets of caps," he replied with a fairly disingenuous tone. "This town's sinking. Most of the mine was cleared out during the last few years of the war, and blasting does nothing more than uncover more and more of this impenetrable facility." He sighed, watching as I chugged down the warm water in one go. I probably should have enjoyed it, but I didn't realize just how thirsty I was until it was gone. "It's not worth exploring any deeper, with this just sitting up here. I know there's valuable arcanotech inside. I just need that door open." Zin balanced one of the cans of beans on her hoof, sliding the other hoof around on top, popping it off after only a few moments. That was a pretty neat trick, seeing as I normally had used my rusty-ass can opener, but once again, that was probably lost forever in the East Orchard. Back to what Pariah said. It made sense, but it wasn't telling me the whole story. I want to know what he's hiding, but I'll have to wait until I've dealt with Zin. Speaking of, she reached back and tossed the can over. I was about to complain, but it smacked straight down in the dirt, resting in a divot just large enough for the floor to catch it. That was impressive, although less so if you're just a zebra-shaped computer. Isaac has a personality. Compared to Zin, while she just seems like she's running processes and programs. I tossed the bottled water aside and kicked up the can of beans, slurping them down eagerly. Damn it. I lost the bean roulette again. Whatever. I just need to eat. Brass had already been doing the same and was currently licking the can clean. My mind drifted momentarily as an odd question floated into my mind. Does being a ghoul change how you taste? My ear flickered, interrupting my thoughts as the sound of hooves quickly approaching caught all of our attention. In the orange of the fluorescent light, the gray stallion from the house we arrived in ran up, a look of distress weighing heavy on his face. "Mr. Pariah, sir. I just got word from the lookout tower that something's heading this way. It's nothing like what she's seen before, so they need you down there." He spoke through his heavy panting, seeming really out of breath for a fit-looking earth pony. At least I have an excuse of being overweight. Although, it's just another check mark on the list of weird things about the ponies in this town. I'm glad that Sky and I never went further in or stayed longer than we did. Well, if we had, I might have found out of the conditions of the mine sooner. Maybe with Sky behind me, we could have made a difference earlier. Fine. Tell them I'll be down in a minute. Go make sure that Righteous is up, and help her get the workers into the mine. If that isn't the Pink Gangster's daily check-up again, this isn't going to be pretty. Pariah turned and glared at me, giving me a look that he wanted to burn my very soul. I had Zin remove the mubble from the door for you. Yesterday, I wanted to see if you'd be willing to at least work with us, and it's obvious you do not. He walked towards me, not shifting his gaze at all. The fires of anger that burned inside him were well stoked from the years of hardship, and his look told me that he was ready and willing to take it all out on me. Oh, and I did happen to hear that you are one of the traders that deal with my town. Forge and Anvil down at the post told me all about how phenomenal your repair work is. A smile slowly knit its way across his muzzle as he spoke. If you really are that good at repairs, I expect that door open by the time I'm done dealing with whatever's down at the gate. And if I can't? I asked, trying to keep my own expression from wavering. I know I can't intimidate him, but I have to at least try. He squinted for a moment, taking in my own expression before turning away from the door. He stepped halfway out of it before looking back at me. Then I'll kill both you and your monster companion. With my legs feeling stronger than yesterday, it hasn't been much of a hassle to follow Zin back up the mountainside. For the first time in nearly a month, my vision was clear of any pink or purple flashing bars or symbols. Having lost the vest and my saddlebags didn't bother me. But the pip-buck? To be walking around without it felt odd. Zin led back inside the cavern. A set of floodlights had been hooked up to a line of spark batteries and filled the cavern with enough light that it could be passed for daytime. I looked over the corner as I was supposed to work on yesterday, and sure enough, it had been cleared. The battered yellow control panel sat out in the open. Most of the lights on it were either too dim to see or not working. But to be honest, I was surprised to see it standing at all. I looked over to Zin as she tugged the rope around my neck, deftly throwing it up and off me with little effort. "So you're a machine?" I asked as I looked her over, watching as she rolled her eyes and held her hoof towards the open door panel. "It matters not. You must work," she urged, a tone of shameful anxiousness coming across her words. She didn't really want to discuss it, but then again, with a secret like that, who would? "I think it does matter." I tried to keep a calm face while walking slowly, trying to fake that my legs were still weak, while I kept my eye on her for a reaction. "Seeing as I repaired another like you just a few days ago." Her eyes went wide only momentarily, just enough for me to see that it might be able to exploit her. "That's impossible. I am the only one of my kind." She was being very dismissive again, and doing a very poor job at it. "You are telling lies." Well, that itself was just a lie. I stopped in front of the console, turning to stare into her eyes as I smiled. I don't know what Anvil or Forge told Pariah, but ponies can't lie to me, even if they are machines. I turned away from her with an expression turned to one of scorn. "I think that you know of Isaac, and that you may, in fact, know how he came to end up in that minefield. And I would love for you to fill me in on who he was." I kicked at the battered panel before me, knocking the cover off of it to reveal a twisted mess of multicolored wiring and tubes. The branching sections hadn't been marked, and crisscrossed in a fashion that I didn't even think Twilight Sparkle herself could have figured out. "Celestia, who the hell designed this thing?" I sighed and leaned down, looking around inside of it as I continued. "Seeing as you're a zebra as well, I'm going to guess you were his wife?" I am his sister." She sounded almost offended as I hoofed whole bundles apart in my search for the controller that controlled the magnetic locks. The gears in my head started turning, trying to figure something out, but I was only half paying attention. So Isaac was her brother. That didn't make any sense at all. "You two can't be siblings. You let him run all the way to Minefield, and you didn't even look for him?" I laid down, rolling onto my back and scooting myself so my head partially fit into the control housing. I used my hoof to trace my way through the spell circuits, from the open door switch back to the emergency safety release button, and then to what should be the magnetic seal controller. Family doesn't just abandon family. But... She stammered. She didn't expect me to be asking these sort of questions. "I raised him until we were both brought into the program. After Zello's attack, he ran off and Pariah forbid me to go after him." Although off balance, she was recovering quickly. "No further questions. Only work." This at least had some sort of explanation, and explained her treatment of Brass. Maybe she is trying to care for him because Isaac is gone? Wait. Zelos, not Isaac. You know what? I'll just let him choose whichever one he wants when I get back. I stopped for a moment, as the sound of high-caliber automatic gunfire filled the air outside. In mere moments, it sounded like the center of town had become a war zone. I did my best to stay cool. If I can just get out of here, I can... The gears in my head started working, reminding me that for the pulse, I needed some sort of timing mechanism or program. Specifically, one that I could easily have gotten from the Pip-Buck had I not lost it, although I might not need it with the defensive as Zin has gotten. She might still agree to help me when presented with the idea of a second chance. So why not help me? I called up, hoofing the magnet's control wires out from its place carefully. Help me get out of here, and I can take you to see him. I'm sure he'd love to have you help him remember everything. I popped my head out of the console and looked up, Zin's eyes darting about as she weighed the possibilities. Her muzzle grew a malevolent smile as she slowly dropped her vision down to me. I don't owe Pariah anymore, and will journey with you to my brother. She spoke honestly, but her words implied much more than she was saying. Tell me where he is, and I shall help you. She lied, and not even well at that. Even after I told her that I could see through her attempted deception, she still tried to get past me. Though I shouldn't be surprised, seeing as how every pony who knows still tries to deceive me at one point or another. The gears in my head turned and threw out another idea. The perfect plan if she doesn't accept my offer. Really? You'd help me out for a second chance? I did my best to keep myself sounding genuine, waiting for her to either take the bait or surprise me with a sincere answer. As long as you tell me where he is, I will get you out. She smiled, her friendly words absolutely dripping with guile. I wanted to let out a sigh of disappointment, but I had to keep up the act if I was going to get the pulse working. I don't know if I should feel happy that I was right about her all along, or if I should feel sorry for her. The sound of gunfire was getting louder. Whoever they were fighting down there was pushing their way up through the town quite fast. Well, in that case, we should get this door open. I smiled and ducked my head back into the mass of wires, slowly swapping the magnetic control wires into the emergency safety release button. But in order to do that, I need your help with activating the emergency safety release. If you hit the button fast enough, it should fool the system into freezing the locking bolts in the open position when I apply power to it. Why open the door? She rose her voice, now trying to compete with the gunfire outside. Why don't you tell me where we must go before it's too late? Worry came through her hesitant words as I stalled. Because, with the doors open, Pariah has a better chance of letting us go. He'll be too busy digging through the orchard to care about chasing us. I shouted back, scooting myself out from inside the console. If you want to go, you need to hoof the baton as fast as your robotic limbs can. I watched as she cringed at the idea of wasting any more time, but shoved herself past me into the console, furiously hoofing the button faster than I've seen any pony move a limb. But she fell right into the trap. You see, once I hit the power button on the board, every time she hoofed the button, the magnets will register a switch between on and off. In doing so at that speed, it will overtax the system and boost the power to the magnets all at once. The strain should be enough that they will either melt or screw me, or create the pulse that I needed the moment before they explode. I stepped beside her, closed my eyes, and switched on the panel. There was a sharp pop, which was immediately followed by what sounded like the miners below doing blasting again. The only sound that followed was the heavy thud of Zin beside me. I opened my eyes to see that the room was completely dark. Even the old terminal in the portable was dark now. I turned around, only able to see the exit by the fact that the sky was growing lighter outside as the sun rose. Ha! It worked! I shouted to myself, particularly proud of not getting myself killed. The pulse should have been strong enough that even a robot as vast as Zin would have had its whole system corrupted. I started towards the door, stopping for a moment as two things hit me. One, the gunfire dying down outside, which means Pariah's forces have repelled the attackers, or the townsfolk were all but wiped out. The second actually sent a wave of guilt through me. I had just killed Zin, the only family member and link to Isaac's past that he had left. How would he react when I told him of this? What will he do to me, if he even remembers who he is? I was pulled from my head as the panicking hoofsteps of some pony echoed on the trail outside. But they weren't normal hoofsteps. They had an odd gait to them. The door flung open from Lodge's magic, his aura casting a small amount of light as he came in and shut the door behind him. He looked like he was scared shitless as he sat back against the door and floated a tab of buck out from the saddlebags he was wearing, crunching it into himself as his eyes darted around the room of the darkened cavern. My ears picked up another sound coming up the trail. He might not have heard it before, but oh, was I ever so glad to hear it. "Hello, Lodge," I called out with a smile. He whined and used his horn to brighten the room a bit. I paced slowly as he looked around for a moment, spotting Zen behind me before trying to compose himself. So, round 2. Feel like making a bet? "We don't have time for that, you fool! We need to hide!" His normal snarkness was gone, replaced by sheer cowardice. The dull thudding of the dual Arcanotech engines outside was punctuated by the hiss and thump of each step as the ED climbed the rocky trail up to us. The machine outside me is a friend of mine, coming here to rescue me and kill all who stand in her way. I can guarantee your life if you win the bet. I spoke slowly, letting each word sink deep as he followed my movements. This was the one thing useful that I took from Sherbert while I was at the base, and I hoped that it worked on Lodge a whole lot better than it did on me. Just answer me 4 questions truthfully. Fine, he called out, Pink's heavy footsteps crawling closer and closer. Just ask! Do you still have the pip-buck removal tool with you? I beamed a smile to him, watching as his horn pulled out the orange tool from his bags momentarily. He nodded softly and waved his hoof, trying to get me to ask the next question. I hesitated for a moment, enjoying him squirming as Pink came to a stop outside the door. What are you carrying in your saddlebags? The whole damn infirmary! Potions, Med-X, Mintols, everything! He closed his eyes and shouted to me. Why are you doing this to me? Next question, and this one's important, so listen up. I stopped and glared at him, waiting for him to open his eyes before continuing. If you live through this, can you honestly tell me that you will never exploit or rip off a pony again? He gasped at that, looking as appalled as if the suggestion itself was an insult to his own mother. No, I will not! First of all, I don't rip ponies off. I charge them a fair amount for the work that I do. Secondly, if they can't pay, what do you expect me to do? Just let them go? He dropped the scared attitude pretty quick, as it looked like his true morals were showing down now. Yes, Lodge, I do. I shook my head. I had really hoped that he would agree, though his land could use another doctor like Dr. Fitz. And my last question. Are you sure about that answer? Fuck you. You come in here and have me save your life, and you expect me to just give up on making caps? He got to his hooves, taking a step towards me. You know, I bet I could just paralyze you again and hold you hostage. Have it your way, I called out, taking a step back. I didn't want to do this, but I gave him his second chance. Hey, Bit! I stopped walking back as my pip-buck chirped from around his forehoof. Use every Med-X he's got. The smile on his face dimmed as he went rigid, slumping over as the light from his horn slowly softened. I walked up to him, hoofing open his saddlebags and pulling the orange tool from it. I bit down on it, jamming it into the pip-buck on his leg and popping it open. As I slid it off, I stared into his eyes as the last moment of life bled out of him. I told you, I only gamble when I can afford it, I remarked as I hoofed the pink device off and over to my leg, snapping it snugly shut. The purple compass and indicators filled my vision again, letting me finally breathe a sigh of relief. I snagged his medical saddlebags and swung them onto me. I turned to the door, walking up and swinging it open, to be immediately blinded by the pink light flooding onto me. Hey there, Chief! The bubbly voice of Pink roared through the air, the massive robot towering in front of me as I walked out of the cave. I held my hoof up, shielding my eyes against the bright pink headlamps of Edie, focused on me. Wow, you shaved! Though, just between you and me, I think your flank looked better with fur on it. Suggestion noted, I said, not helping but smile. She dimmed the headlights down enough to where I could look over at her. Edie was covered in a mix of thick mud and deep red splotches on the legs and underbelly. You've got red on you. Oh, well, I've been following your Pip-Buck tag for the last few days. But about a half an hour ago, I ran into a whole gang of 42's goons heading this direction. I just had to stop by and say hello. She stomped and turned around. It's not my fault that they think I'm some sort of wasteland monstrosity and tried to kill me. Backlash! Brass called out from atop Pink. Hurry up and let's get out of this place. We can't. Not just yet. I dropped between Edie's legs as I talked. The sun was finally brightening up the sky, casting an orange hue through the thin mountains clouds that filtered over the jagged landscape. I could barely make it out, but the town below looked to be bustling. The ponies were probably trying to set up hastily to build defensive positions. Celestia, why is it that I have to concern myself with defenses, ambushes, and bad guys? I just wanted to be a successful trader. Chief Backlash, wait! Pink roared as she turned Edie around. After you left with the others on the boat, I found this sitting on the riverbank. There was a light hiss as the compartment of the wireless box used to be opened. My old, worn-out, and slightly muddied saddlebags dropped to the dirt with a thud. You found my stuff! I yelled jubilantly, smiling widely as I kicked off Lodge's bags. Brass, take those bags. They're full of medical supplies we might need. I trot back up under Edie, biting down on the bags and swinging them back over to me, loving the familiar feeling of the worn straps over my back. I sat down and lifted my left hoof, flipping through my Pip-Buck screens to get to the inventory. For weapons, I had 42's revolver, which was in okay condition, Heartstopper, which was in amazing condition, but that's to be expected considering I just fired 4 shells from it. Some energy pistol named Shining Defender with 2 shots, which was probably the one I had taken from the facility. And lastly, the party cannon, which the Pip-Buck told me was nearly destroyed. I had no medical supplies, but that was fine, seeing as I just inherited some. As for the other things still left in here, my Pip-Buck connection cable. How did it get dumped out on the Equestria facility, I'll never know. But thanks Celestia, I'd found it. I pulled my hoof away as my Pip-Buck beeped, the screen switching to the smiling face of Bit as she scrolled text across the screen. Chief, I respectfully request to be transferred to Prototype 209. I'd love to, but I kind of have to deal with Pariah first. I pulled myself back to my hooves and started to head along the trail again, Pink stomping along behind me slowly. His treatment of the mine workers is unacceptable. Safety equipment can be found for cheap everywhere, so there's no excuses for skimping on it other than greed. I glanced down as Bit tried to get my attention again, a frowning face appearing on the Pip-Buck as I stopped to look at it once more. Everyone needs a second chance, Backlash. Even donkeys. I'll make sure to give him the choice. But so far, both Zinn and Lodge turned it down. I'm not sure the Pariah will be any different, given his history with the Ministry. I sighed and shook my head.